Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us tonight, once again, Mr. Harry Gross, who is a man of many talents, many skills, and one of them is being the head of research at the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. Now, among his other interests is, I would say, liberal politics and trying to catch the falling star that is the Democratic Party and present some arguments that would comport with their viewpoint, which is very useful and reasonable. Now, Harry, tonight, there are many things we could discuss, but possibly we could start with the efforts of the courts to basically referee the struggle between our President Trump and I guess his objectives. He has the support of, I think, our bicameral legislative body, as far as I can tell, and possibly support of other important institutions. But right now, what seems to be going on is when President Trump does something that I would modestly say would be extreme, then courts have stopped that. They've issued injunctions. And when they've issued these injunctions, they've often made it nationwide. And often, the Republicans might say, that judges have been picked to come up with this opinion. Now, having said that, I think it's important to understand the job of the courts is to basically referee such impulses. And our system has checks and balances in there, going all the way back to Montesquieu and the Founding Fathers. We have this system in place that the Founding Fathers wish to guard against, which would be the appearance of a tyrannical personality. It would be hard to do things the way that King George III might have done them here in North America. So there are many, many protections against that, and the substantial responsibility are in the courts. And one of the things going on now that to me seems quite unseemly would be to actually attack judges to say, well, you're a bad person, we should impeach you, we should throw you out. You've rendered an opinion that's basically contrary to my opinion, and therefore you can no longer serve the people. Now, maybe you could, I'll give you the football, and I know there's an open field, and you're a halfback, and you've nice 90-yard run in front of you. So
well,
what do you think?
Let's see if we can score the touchdown here. I think that the system of checks and balances fundamentally depends upon the mutual respect of all three branches of government. That's the one fatal flaw of the system. Is when you have a personality who is willing to say, I really don't care what you think, it becomes very hard to police that and enforce that. We have seen this before. Andrew Jackson famously said when Indian removal was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, Mr. Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. And
that was not tariffs he was talking about?
I don't believe it was tariffs. No, it was Indian removal.
Okay.
Like Worcester v. Georgia declared that it was unconstitutional and those treaties were not legally binding. And so
Maybe
but
he did
Andrew
it on
Jackson
tariffs.
did it anyway.
Maybe he did it on tariffs also.
And maybe he did.
Yes.
But in the sense that the point being, Indian removal was unconstitutional, declared so by the courts. Andrew Jackson did it anyway. He did not care to respect.
Let him enforce it.
Mr. Marshall let him enforce it. John Marshall was Chief Justice at the time.
Yes,
still.
now let him do that. Yes.
Now enforce it. And in those situations, it is incumbent on Congress, the way the system works, to hold the president's feet to the fire and either bring him to the table of enforcing the law as it has been ruled by the courts, amending the law, or punishing the president for violating the law.
Now, there are other, you mentioned Andrew Jackson. What about Franklin Roosevelt?
Franklin Roosevelt did face some pushback, and then when court packing was brought up, I think court packing is a bit of a misnomer. It was I would say actually, in terms of the proposal, it was perfectly reasonable and in line with tradition and law to expand the size of the court. There is nothing in the Constitution that says it has to be a certain number. The other justices got in line pretty quick.
But the reason he wished to do that was they had an opinion that was contrary to his and contrary to the New Deal.
Well, not just contrary to the New Deal. The Lochner era is one of the most shameful eras of American politics in terms of Supreme Court rulings. We're talking legalization of sterilization of mentally ill people, anti-immigrant rulings, anti-black rulings.
There are many.
It is an incredibly shameful era.
Many times courts have made decisions that don't resonate with us well today. I think that's
Absolutely,
fair. I'm
but
not sure
they were also not resonating well with people at the time.
Well,
the Lochner court was deeply unpopular, and FDR's threat to expand the court did bring the court back into a place of moderation.
They were intimidated, and so so this is what I'm trying to make the case: is this is not an unusual event.
Well, there's a difference between threatening to kill judges, to have their family members killed, or have them impeached, than to just say, I'm going to add new justices to dilute your power base.
Well, so also, did the Democrats not at least suggest that a little bit in the last Trump term? The Supreme Court was not doing things, and was there a thought, well, maybe Franklin Roosevelt had a good idea?
Oh, I think he had a great idea. Personally, there are 13 district courts in America. There's only 9 justices. That means each justice actually is responsible for more than one district court. Expanding the court to 13 justices would actually lessen the work individual judges have to do, bring us in line with the structure of the judicial network of the United States, and would actually provide a reasonable and balanced majority, maintain the same overall structure. You could do it in such a way that it doesn't provide an extreme liberal bias in the court, although I would love that. I think there's a balance that could be struck. But the point is, court expansion has its benefits. What we cannot deny is that this has been an activist court. The Roberts Court has been one of the most activist courts since American history.
It's a difficult word.
Activist courts in this case means policy making. And if you actually read the instructions, Justice Alito has actually crafted environmental policy in many of his majority opinions.
1954 Supreme Court decision, wasn't that a policy making event? And if you go through the whole deal, that's normally the Republican argument, is the Democrats are too activists, the judges are too activists, and they would even say right now, which is an issue to discuss. There are issues to discuss. One of them is that, and this happened with the Republicans too. This happens both ways, and maybe that's something to consider about the judicial system, because of its, I think we both agree, it has tremendous responsibilities. There's a lot of the fate of the nation, in many ways, resides in their wisdom. It's a big deal. And so often what happens is the district judge may say, well, I'm going to, outlaw income tax or something like that. Some incredible decision that's made that takes a long time to reverse. And I think the Republicans sought out judges that would do that too.
Oh, they absolutely did.
And that may be a common
The Fifth Circuit is notorious.
Right.
For
And
that.
what's the one on the West Coast? 11th? What is that? 9th, 11th?
I think it might be the Ninth Circuit.
It's a similar one out there. So notorious can go both ways.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing. There's certainly a pro and a con.
Is that a problem if we have this tremendous responsibility? And I think this is an issue of consequence. Firstly, I would agree. This is a really bad idea to insult the legal system. That's really, really bad. And the legal system has enough problems, in my opinion, if people imagine they're just hacks for the different parties or different viewpoints. So we were able to put this judge in wherever, and the judge has obviously pretty extreme viewpoint. A normal observer would say that. And that rather extreme judge, firstly, is impossible to remove the judge, he or her, from office because of their decisions, their opinions, pretty much, as long as there's no obvious corruption. But we wind up in a situation where people don't think they're going to get justice, depending on the court. And indeed, and I think this is one of the things I would submit from that is a factor, and the judicial system needs to strive to expunge it. And that is that if you're a certain you appear to have a certain ideology or a strong bias in a particular direction, then whatever decision comes your way, it's a foregone conclusion that will be the case. Moreover, juries are the same way. So if you put a case in where a jury pool has strong opinions, and you know that you're going to get, let's say, people with strong opinions, maybe reasonably strong opinions. Maybe all this is reasonable. Maybe it's reasonable to have strong opinions. It's reasonable for the judge to have that. But whatever the fine line of justice is can be violated. And I think you can, one case to consider is O.J. Simpson case, which many observers would say, well, I'm surprised with the verdict. And apparently the person that decided where to send the case sent it into a inner city place where the assumption would be that inner city group would generally tilt in OJ's direction and stop riots, struggles, whatever. So that was the decision that was made. And probably, I think one of the things to consider is all of the charges, not defending him, but just making comments about this. All the charges that President Trump has faced in different venues, pretty much an external observer would say, well, he's gone into places where they're linchpins of the Democratic Party.
Well, I would disagree with that. The classified documents case was purposely placed in a Trump stronghold in front of a judge who was appointed by Trump.
Which case was that?
The classified documents case that he had
Is that
illegally
the one in
removed.
Florida?
Yes, that was one in Florida.
And that judge then turned him loose.
Yes,
Okay.
but it was a Trump-appointed judge, but that was purposely placed there in order to avoid that exact impression that it was.
Just my point. You make my point, which is in trying to put a justice system that people can repose confidence in. Doing the actions like this are not good. That's my thought about it. And I'm not sure how this can be appropriately ramrodded. I'm not sure how you really, now presumably the way this happens is that this Judge X, a lower court district judge, makes a decision, whatever it is. And well, let's shoot him, says President Trump. Let's do something. I mean, this guy needs to be expunged right now. And there's a way to do that in the Constitution, but not for a contrary opinion. And just saying it. This judge, something bad needs to happen to him because he ruled against me. That's not rational in my thought, and I can understand it. I mean, whatever rationality means, I can understand how you would be injured by the judicial process, and obviously he has been. Of course, I understand that. But the takeaway message is, the role you're in, anything that disturbs the public's confidence in the judicial system is bad. And I think doing that is bad, and and it may even be true. It may be true that, as we quoted some cases there, that to have disinterested opinion is very tough now, particularly in a lower first court arrangement. But presumably, as you go up, that's been anticipated. And going up the judicial hierarchy, presumably, there'll be a more balanced arrangement will take place on appeal. And that should be sort of the salvation of the situation. And I don't know if President Trump is putting that point out well enough. It's just not a good idea to say Judge X is a terrible person, and if I could get to him, I would. It sounds tyrannical. It doesn't sound good. It is
tyrannical because that's what he wants to do. He has no interest in governing within the bounds of the Constitution. He's already saying in direct violation of the 22nd Amendment that he's going to run for a third term. He keeps insisting that it's not a joke. It doesn't matter if it is a joke. The very insistence of it. I know you don't take him seriously on this, but I would point to the record that everything that you have refused to take him seriously on so far, that I have taken him seriously on, we have come to that road and he's followed through.
Well, let's talk to that point. Now, this is a big thing. Now, I'm observing, as many people are, how the country is going, how the ship is sailing, how the plane is flying, whatever. And there are things that are alarming happening. That doesn't mean that it's permanent. It doesn't mean that there's not a checks and balances existing. And one of the things existing is I'd say, at least me, Harry, I like to think of myself as disinterested. And I'll even give you that appellation. I'd say you're within your limits. You're disinterested.
I would say I'm objective, not disinterested.
All right, okay. Well, that's maybe a better. That could be a better.
I have a clear invested interest in the well-being of humanity in this country.
I'll give you that. Possibly, I'll surrender that point. Well, the takeaway message is that the argument for these policies, and many well-wishers in the Republican Party or elsewhere, the system is absolutely, totally broken. And no one else will do anything about it. And if they tried to do something about it, the deep state would inevitably defeat them. Because over the years, the deep state has been put in decade by decade, year by year, month by month. That means people that have a certain ideological viewpoint have been in positions of power everywhere. And so that system is just going to, would be the argument. This is an argument in Trump's behalf, I mean, if I'll try and make it. So, okay, this is the way the system is. There's nothing to do about it. And so Trump, by use of hyperbole, I mean, that's an argument, hyperbole and extreme statements, pushes the goalpost so far out of the stadium almost, that the new point of equilibrium is in the middle. That might be the argument that's being made, and I keep waiting for that to happen. So it does appear there's a gratuitous pleasure that President Trump may obtain by making a lot of these extreme statements, which would go along with a narcissistic personality, an extreme narcissistic personality. Now, okay, all that's all right. I mean, how many politicians are narcissistic? Millions of them. They do this. They do. They strut down life stage. They puff their chest out. That's all okay. And the question is are these extreme gestures, are they going to really do some harm? I guess that's what I would say.
They are absolutely going to do harm, and they are already doing real harm, right, to real people. Failure to abide by, there's already documented failure to abide by court orders, particularly in the cases of deportation and immigration issues, where you've had judges issue stays of deportation, saying in the case of Ms. Ustark, who is a PhD student who was arrested on the street by masked men and carried off to an ICE.
Was she from Cornell? Is that where she was from?
No, I think maybe it was Columbia, one of the other. Her only crime, and which is, by the way, not a crime, was penning an op-ed criticizing Israel's actions in Palestine. If penning an op-ed is a crime, then so many people are under the radar. But she was picked up in the middle of the street by masked men on camera, whisked off to a deportation and detention center in Massachusetts. A federal judge said she cannot be removed from Massachusetts because her case is here. This is where the jurisdiction is. And before her lawyer could even get a chance to talk to her, she was whisked off illegally to Louisiana, where she is currently being held in violation of order. You have dozens of deportees sent to El Salvador despite a court order saying you cannot let this plane take off yet. And then when they got there, and there is, by the way, no clear evidence that any of these people have committed any crimes or are guilty of what they've been accused of. And the action is now, well, they're in El Salvador and they're outside of U.S. jurisdiction, so too bad. That's real harm to real people.
Right. Let me speak to that point. I'll agree with that. Harm has been done, but the argument would be, well, Trump is breaking some plates, and I'll say what maybe the argument on that side would be that the immigration policy for the country or whatever it is complicated. And I mean, if you go back, well, there's many ups and downs to it. It would take, obviously, books and books and hours and hours to even make the slightest comment about it. But there's initial Western European colonist population here. A lot of exterminations took place. The land was, many bondspeople came in. All these events took place. The country was seeking its national psyche. Immigration had some subtle limitations, particularly on the West Coast, but getting Oriental people in.
Very specific and not subtle. The Chinese Exclusion Act was not revoked for 60 years.
Right. All right. I mean, I'll take that point.
We detained Japanese Americans during World War II.
That's a separate issue. In my opinion, that's a separate issue. But in any event, there are efforts to keep the country to match Western Europe, to kind of match it. And and also let the melting pot cook, I guess you'd say. So everybody's, we get a little bit used to each other, and we adopt some kind of national mythology, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, I got that. And then in 1965, for many reasons, a lot of them referable to the Kennedy assassination, which is another big story. But okay, the law changed, and then we have many reasons to change the national makeup. So that happened. So this has been going on for many reasons, many years. And then one of the issues would be, in the middle of all this, allegedly, there are many open doors to get here, and there are many legal pathways and many efforts to change the ethnic picture of the country. I could say to make it more of a browner place, or possibly a more ecumenical place. I mean, whatever. That's what was happening. Then, just to go back to the Trump argument, then the Democratic Party basically seeking which is, I think, possible, seeking electoral advantage by changing the makeup of the country. That's an argument you may not agree with.
I think anyone who thinks that letting in large numbers of people from Central and South America is going to result in a landslide for a socially liberal party doesn't understand the cultural dynamics of Central and South America.
Well, that you could say what group of people comes in and what the economic events are, but I would say, just to make, you may say, well, they were not complicit in this. They just were clumsy about the enforcing laws. But I'm just kidding.
If you actually look, though, at the enforcement basis, enforcement of the border was actually stronger in Democratic presidents than in a very long time. We have more arrests and more encounters at the border under the Biden administration than we ever had under the Trump administration because enforcement was stepped up. When encounters at the border go down, that means people are slipping through the cracks.
You don't think that more people were trying to come in the Biden, which apparently I would submit was the case. So thousands of people were coming in. Millions of people came in, 10 million, whatever the story is. It's sort of the point
We had developed a system to legally allow asylees, which is the largest number of people trying to get to this country, or people seeking asylum. We had a system whereby they were put in Mexico and made to wait in Mexico. We had an application by which you made appointments so that you monitored how many people came to the border at all times, right? Yes, there was an increase, but in terms of actual illegal immigration, we actually got better at catching undocumented entrances into this country
I would
than we
say,
were under the Trump administration. But we are so far off the mark here. The point that is relevant to me in this matter, I can debate immigration policy with you all night long, and I'll happily do so, is that due process is being denied to these people. Whether they are here legally, illegal, whether they're criminals or innocent, the only way you determine that status is through due process. And due process, the Fifth Amendment, applies to every single person in this country, not just to citizens. Because if without due process, you are not a citizen of this country. You are whatever the nearest law enforcement officer says you are.
Well, okay. Now, just to make the point, I don't surrender the point that this was a stratagem of the Democratic Party. By no means.
I think that we'll have that debate another time, because I think that's
the other point is, whatever the circumstances, millions of people across the border, millions and millions of people, they're everywhere in the country, and there was a policy to basically allow these people into the country. And I'll now make this comment. Legal immigration is one thing, and millions of people have come in here legally. But the story is we now offer the ideal that we have a responsibility. It's our responsibility to basically take our money, our wealth, and then give it to people that need it if they'll only come here. And then once they're here, there are all kinds of rights and privileges accrue to them, and all they have to do is cross a little stream there. Well, I mean, whether that's true or not, I'll accept the argument that's not true, that's false, whatever. But the takeaway message, I'm getting into the Trump-esque arrangement for this, and this is an important point, he would say, well, the Democrats have just put in 10 millions of people here. 10 million people have come in, and no one wanted them here. There are people, no one is too strong of a word, but I would say a substantial number of people would rather they have not come. They would rather they have not come, a substantial number of people, and a substantial number of people think, well, this is not good. And President Trump says he's going to remove these people. He's going to do two things. Firstly, he's going to close the border, which he successfully did. He did, as far as I can tell. I could be wrong. And one big card in the deck is if people, and I'll also say this, Harry, I went to, it's a long story, an immigration symposium with the governor of, no, the ambassador from Guatemala, sundry other people. That's another story. But so I've had a little knowledge of it, somewhat. But the people have, that's a small thing I did, but other things. So the people are here, and Trump says it's really, really bad. They're here, and he said, I'll get them out, and I'll close the border. He successfully closed the border, and one big reason being, the knowledge is out there, you can't come here. If you come here, something bad is going to happen. So then, it looks like his policy has a couple of points, which may not be legal, or I would accept they're not legal. But that seems to be what he's doing to this substantial problem that he thinks is a big problem. So we have all these people, and his supporters think that. All these people are here, they shouldn't be here, they need to go back where they came, and I voted to get that policy in place. Well, of course, how do you do that? How do you do that? And you made the comment, which is a legal one. I think and there are certainly legal reasons that where all kinds of rights accumulate if you show up here illegally, even the right to vote. So in certain democratic cities, the idea is that you don't have to be a citizen to vote.
That is not the case. That is absolutely not the case, because it is illegal under the Constitution.
But in the city election, it may well be illegal. But people are saying, well, wink, wink, I'm just going to do that. And what I'm continuing on is...
Well, I'm saying, and there have been widespread investigations of this, largely by the Republican Party, and the most instances of voter fraud...
This is not voter fraud.
That is actually what constitutes voter fraud. Would be misrepresenting yourself as a citizen. That would be voter fraud. And the largest cases of voter fraud come from registered Republicans.
Well, I'll keep at it. The story is that the rights that are privileges that people have when they come here, I'll ask this question, is if you have 10 million people here that have come here and breaking our law, and the question is, why are you here? And the story is, I'm here for whatever reason you want to say. I was in a bad relationship and my husband abused me or something, or I felt threatened by gang activity, or my child is sick, or I don't have enough to eat. Whatever the reason is, some reason can be presented.
Okay, the first you listed you are reasonable causes for asylum. The second would be reasonable cause for refugee status, all of which are legal pathways to entry into the United States.
So let's talk about that. So this is not in the Constitution. These laws have been put in, or regulations. Another thing to do is to be cautious about parsing out whatever the difference between a law and a regulation. And I don't know if I can parse all that out. I will say...
Well, regulations are legal under the federal code,
right,
which is separate to congressional law. So all of this is, we're talking the law of the land. We are so far out of where we started.
No, but I'm trying to get to the point with difficulty. So my point is that Trump wants to break plates. He wishes to break plates.
And the plates that he's breaking are fundamental guardrails of American democracy and citizenship.
Let's discuss that. So the idea is apparently about the only way. Is there another way to remove 10 million people? It's really, really a vexing problem. And it's another...
Through proper investigation, through legal channels. Because once again, being an undocumented immigrant is not a criminal offense.
Isn't it?
It's a civil offense. If you are caught crossing the border, that's a criminal offense. But if you are undocumented in the United States That is a civil offense.
A civil offense meaning you can be sued.
Meaning you can be sued. It's the same. No, I mean it's the same as like a traffic violation.
Like
you go to court for a traffic violation.
Okay, but with the penalties, there are penalties
Yes,
attached to this.
there are penalties attached
that a traffic violation would not have. You would be.
And
you
so,
have to
and how do
leave
these
the
penalties
country.
work? If you were caught on being undocumented, you are detained by Immigration Customs Enforcement, by ICE. You were detained by ICE. You were supposed to be given a court date.
This is the
You
old
were supposed to be then report to that court for hearing your immigration status. Now, because it's a civil violation, it does not mean immigrants are not afforded the same rights as American citizens are in a court of law. They're not afforded a right to a lawyer. They're not afforded a right to a translator. Children are not afforded the right to represent themselves. It's an incredibly inhumane system. Now, we can talk real
No, I'm going to get off of it.
reform here.
I'm going to get off this, but my point would be what you've named, all these rights and privileges that have gone to immigrant population. Are these laws that were passed, or who passed the laws, or have the courts extended this, or are there regulations, or why? I mean, just ask the question.
Well, the right to attorney was established with the Fifth Amendment through Miranda v. Arizona.
So
that's a constitutional right.
So you have a constitutional right to cross that border?
No, you have a constitutional right as an American citizen in a criminal case to an attorney.
No,
what I'm saying is because what I'm saying is that none of those rights and privileges are afforded to immigrants in immigration courts because they are not citizens.
How did they get in immigration courts? So in other
because
words,
they were detained through ICE, through investigation, through the course of the thing. They were not rounded up en masse like cattle and shipped off because most citizens are going to be caught in that.
Let's just go through this again. And this is kind of my point. I don't know how well I'm making it. We're getting sort of going back and forth on the justice of, I believe we're getting near our end. I can't quite see. But, and I'll conclude almost, and then I'll let you say the last thing. My point I was trying to make is that Trump is doing, I would say, breaking plates and doing desperate things to deal with the problem. So all these desperate things are out there. Now, presumably, the courts should reverse that. It should stop that. But his purpose may be to have made these extreme gestures to put some light on the problem. And I think it's a big deal. If you think, and you do, obviously, that 10 million people, or whatever the number is, are going to have a substantial number of rights once they're here, and that if you're here for a long time, you're going to have children, and the situation will be extremely difficult. And presumably, those 10 million people are here for keeps. And Trump's campaign pledge is not going to work. So it appears that he's making very extreme gestures that presumably will ultimately be reversed. Okay, you can say something.
Well, I would say this in closing. I believe the courts will reverse most of those things. I do not believe the Trump administration will honor those reversals or accede to the court's demands. I think in many cases they're already proving that they do not care and that they would rather adopt the Jacksonian attitude of saying, let them do what they can to enforce it.
Okay.
What matters here in this country, right, and this, we can talk about immigration reform all day long, is that everyone who is in this country, legally, illegally, unless they are a member of an invading army, is covered by the Constitution. The Constitution does not stop at citizens. And those constitutional rights deserve to be respected, because if you don't respect them for one particular group of society, it becomes very easy to disrespect them for everyone. Once you legitimize a process by which you can target one specific group, you can use that to target any other group in society. That is what history has shown us over and over and over again. And if these discriminatory practices run roughshod over the civil rights of inhabitants of the United States of America, to be a citizen of this country, and the constitutional rights that come with that will be meaningless unless something changes.
I'll let it go. I could comment to that, but thank you. So we'll talk some more about other things.
Yes.
Thanks for being here, Harry. Thank you.